Hey guys, tonight we sink into the warm, musky air of pre-colonial Maliland of gold. Drums and whisper-thin secrets stitched into goat leather amulets. Picture this. It's dusk along the Niger River, and the heat hasn't quite broken. You're sitting in a low-slung reed hut as the last light bleeds amber through a slit in the wall. Outside, crickets rasp like they're grinding knives, and inside, a griot with a voice like worn velvet begins to sing, not of wars or kings or divine decrees, but of thighs wrapped in silk, of charms buried in bread dough, and of a queen who once made an entire cavalry forget their wives with a single smile. That's your warning. You probably won't survive this. Not because of danger, but because your brain might melt trying to figure out how a 14th century society without TikTok thirst traps or demons turn seduction into serious business. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your location and the local time in the comments. I love seeing how far this sleepy little cult of history lovers reaches. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge barefoot through the ochre dust, your steps slow and sticky. The air smells of roasted millet, dried fish, and something sharper, maybe cloves. Or sweat, or secrets. You pass through a market where women balance silver basins on their heads, swaying like palm trees in windless heat, their hips wrapped in indigo cloth that leaves nothing and everything to the imagination. Their eyes don't meet yours directly, but you feel them scan you, weigh you. They're not just vendors. Some of them are watching to see if you notice the small, carved pendant tied just above the curve of their waist. That's no fashion statement. That's a sigil, part love spell, part security system, and it works better than pepper spray or good lighting. Mali wasn't all gold-laced turbans and epic poems. It was also flirtation weaponized, intimacy codified, desire ritualized. The empire's strength came not just from horses and trade routes, but from how its people turned sex into currency, into craftsmanship, into ceremony. And underneath it all were the love charms, some sweet, some sinister. You're going to meet one tonight eventually. But first, you need to understand the context. The griot's version of Netflix and chill involved actual bloodletting, honey. Smearing or sewing things under the skin. Historians still argue whether these charms were more spiritual or strategic. Were they acts of devotion or coercion with better marketing? Some claim women used them to protect themselves from abandonment or abuse. Others say men made charms to enslave affection, ensure obedience, and curse rivals with impotence. Either way, there was no such thing as casual affection. You didn't just catch feelings, you caught magic. And the side effects could include obsession, power, or premature death. Take the story of Fatimata, a merchant's daughter who fell for a visiting scholar. He was charming, yes, but also deeply broke. Her family disapproved, naturally. So Fatimata went to a charm woman who brewed something from powdered baobab seeds, honey, menstrual blood, and snake skin. She added it to a kola nut the scholar would chew during a Quranic recitation. It worked. He stayed. He married her. He also lost all his memory of his life before her, and spent his final years wandering the courtyard, reciting her name as if it were scripture. You swallow hard. The air tastes thicker now. This isn't history the way school taught it. This is history that sweats. This is what happens when you zoom in on a civilization's quiet corners, behind the throne room, inside the woven curtain of a midwife's hut, beneath the floorboards of a royal bedroom where whispers still curl like incense. Here's your first quirky tidbit. In some parts of Mali, lovers used to sneak slivers of carved ebony wood under their tongue while speaking to their beloved. If the wood warmed in their mouth, it meant true desire. If it stayed cold, it meant deceit. It was their version of a lie detector, except the test was spiritual, not scientific. And sometimes, the wood didn't wait. There are tales of tongues blistering or swelling on contact, which, to be honest, seems like a pretty solid way to find out if someone's bad for you. As night creeps in and the crickets switch to full orchestra mode, the scent of incense or maybe burning teeth slips through the air. Somewhere nearby, someone is performing a charm ceremony. You can't see it, but you hear the soft chanting, the sound of a knife scraping against stone, the hush of something ancient and private being remembered. You want to know what the charm is for love, fertility, revenge? But you also kind of don't. Some things once known can't be unknown. Still, you keep walking. Because if Molly's magic has a pull, it's this. It doesn't just promise romance, it promises recognition. Someone, somewhere once loved like you do. Awkwardly, fiercely, desperately, with a mix of hope, desperation, strategy, and probably a little deception. But they made a charm for it, and that charm might still be buried somewhere, wrapped in goat skin and tucked under the earth, humming softly with all that undelivered longing. You turn a corner, and suddenly the market swallows you whole. It's louder here, denser. Drums pulse from somewhere unseen, syncing with your heartbeat like they've always known it. Smoke curls from a food stall where something is frying in she oil, and a child runs past with a chicken tucked under one arm and a string of teeth in the other. Not human, don't worry, probably. Crocodile teeth, actually. You duck under a low awning and step into a shaded lane filled with vendors selling exactly what no one admits to buying. Protection from heartbreak, vengeance against flirtation, and sometimes hope. Molly's markets aren't just for salt and gold. They're ecosystems of emotional survival, especially in the lanes where love charms change hands under the guise of cosmetics or chewing sticks. One woman, wrapped in 6 layers of wax-dyed cloth and humming softly, lifts a leather pouch for you to smell. It reeks of herbs, sweat, and something faintly metallic. "Make any man cry," she says, not breaking her rhythm. Another offers you a powder she claims can make someone dream of her face for 3 nights straight. A third, the quietest of the bunch, leans in and whispers, "This one brings guilt to cheaters." She doesn't blink. You realize this isn't quirky to her. This is Tuesday. Here's your fringe tidbit. Crocodile parts were highly sought after, not just the teeth, but the fat and dung too. The teeth were drilled and strung as necklaces to bite back against wandering affections. The fat was smeared on inner thighs before big dates, believed to inflame a passion or at least confuse the senses. And dung, dried and powdered, was allegedly used as sunscreen with aphrodisiac side effects. You can't make this up. People really used crocodile dung to glow and attract. How's that for SPF minus 50 plus emotional manipulation? As you move through the stalls, the charm vendors grow less performative. You enter the domain of specialists. These aren't the loud ones with catchy slogans. They're the ones you have to notice on purpose. They don't advertise. They just sit still, completely still, until you look at them long enough. Then they tilt their heads, blink slowly, and reach under their mats. One offers you a braid of hair wrapped around a lizard's foot. Another opens a pouch containing a single dried tongue, yes, a tongue tied with copper wire. "Silence her jealousy," he says, as if he's selling garlic. Some items come with chance. Others with instructions involving specific times of day, lunar phases, or bodily fluids you'd rather not ask about. Historians still argue whether these practices were centralized or scattered, if love charms formed a structured magical economy, or if they were just underground traditions passed from auntie to niece. Some suggest royal courts actively encouraged charm work to keep concubines docile and rivals distracted. Others believe it was purely grassroots folks trying to survive the emotional minefields of dynastic politics and communal living. Either way, the demand was high, the recipes closely guarded, and the results Well, variable. Want a royal sex story? You're getting one. Picture this. A young concubine named Alita is brought to the court of a high-ranking general in the late 14th century. She's barely spoken and barely dressed, but she's got something stitched into the hem of her wrap, a thin pouch containing kola nut dust, snail shell fragments, and a single thread from the general's cloak, stolen days earlier. That night, she lies completely still, eyes open, not touching him. And still, the next morning, he proclaims her the most enchanting woman he's ever known. Over the next month, he begins refusing all other lovers. He writes songs about her, composes poems, forgets his military reports. Eventually, the court astrologer intervenes. The general's behavior is compromised, they say. A charm is discovered in his drinking gourd placed there by Delita's nurse. He doesn't exile her, he promotes her. You tell me who's really in control. You're starting to realize these charms aren't just romantic trinkets. They're strategies. Whether for love, loyalty, or leverage, they represent a world where affection isn't left to chance. It's negotiated, bound, activated. A love letter is sweet. A charm is insurance. And when you live in a world where marriages are arranged, reputations fragile, and desires policed by both custom and spirit, you need all the insurance you can get. And yet, you can't help but admire the craft. The carvings are delicate, the knotwork tight, the inscriptions so fine you almost miss them. Some are poems, others warnings. You run your fingers across one charm made from woven copper strands and dyed leather, and your skin prickles. The vendor nods. That one, she says, was made to remember a dead lover. It keeps you warm when grief sleeps beside you. You pause. Not everything here is manipulation. Some of it is memory. As the sun begins to drop, casting honeyed shadows across the market floor, you feel the heat rise off the dirt like a final breath. You're sweaty, overwhelmed, slightly enchanted. But you've only scratched the surface. The court seductions await, the private quarters where love becomes currency, and every glance is calculated. Better hydrate. You're not just walking into history. You're flirting with it. You pass through the last of the market's woven archways and emerge into the quieter part of town, the one only a few people ever get to see. No shouting vendors here, no clatter of sandals on clay. Just the whisper of silk brushing against stone, the occasional rattle of gold bangles, and the heavy scent of amber oil. You've made it to the inner court. Here, love isn't improvised, it's orchestrated. You're now in the royal harem, where sex isn't just pleasure or politics. It's both, and then some. This isn't a brothel, and it's not some cliché palace of passive women reclining on cushions, waiting to be summoned. No, this is a school. A stage, a battlefield. A testing ground where affection is wielded like a blade, and the art of seduction is a curriculum with oral exams you don't want to fail. You tiptoe across mosaic tiles into the bathhouse courtyard. The air is warm and humid, smelling of jasmine and goat milk soap. Women laugh behind curtains, their voices low and confident. One of them, an older woman with eyes like polished onyx and cheekbones that could cut silk, catches your gaze. She doesn't smile, she studies you. You suddenly remember you're the outsider here, a curiosity at best, a potential threat at worst. This is her domain. She probably trained half the women in the harem. And if you asked her what her profession was, she'd say something vague and terrifying like advisor or keeper. But make no mistake, she's a general and the battlefield is the bedchamber. One girl walks past you, her hair threaded with gold wire, her waist beads singing a rhythm with every step. She's not here by accident. The Sultan's scouts found her in a trading town months ago, watched how men looked at her, saw how she walked, how she spoke. They brought her here not to entertain, but to influence. When she's ready, her glances alone could alter trade negotiations. trigger inheritance disputes, or cause the sudden retirement of a rival advisor. And if all else fails, well, that's what the charms are for. Here's your royal sex story. A 15th century Mansa had a concubine named Zalia, gifted to him by a rival clan as a peace gesture. Zalia was a live-in olive branch, or so they thought. But she had no intention of fading into the background. Instead, she worked her way into his routine. She sang to him at twilight. She served his meals herself. She insisted on massaging his feet after prayer, even when he protested. Within weeks, he couldn't eat unless she blessed the food first. Within months, she was dictating which provinces deserved investment. The palace whisperers claimed she'd hidden a powder charm beneath his bed, one made from lion whiskers and mother's milk. Whether it was the charm or her charm, no one could say. But when she asked for her old village to receive a new well, he said yes. When she asked for a new mosque, he said yes again. When she asked for the head of the rival's envoy, well, guess. Historians still argue whether women like Zalia truly held power, or whether their influence was simply tolerated until it became inconvenient. Some say they were scapegoats blamed when kings faltered. Others say they were architects behind the scenes, quietly building policy out of pillow talk. The line between concubine and advisor was thinner than anyone liked to admit. The harem was full of knowledge. Women taught one another everything. How to apply scent in 6 places only lovers would find. How to tilt the head so a man believes he's winning when he's already lost. How to sing in dialects only his mother spoke. To him, these weren't passive ornaments. They were trained agents of desire. Each had a role: the quiet one, the bold one, the melancholic one, carefully depending on the sultan's mood or the needs of the court. Love was a script, and they edited it daily. One woman shows you her collection of charms, rolled into dyed leather scrolls and tucked inside a jewelry box. This one, she says, unwrapping a thin sliver of parchment, makes a man apologize first, even if he doesn't know what he did. Another, a braid of human hair bound with tiny blue beads, keeps his eyes from wandering. She doesn't laugh as she says it. She's completely serious. And you believe her. Because in this world, emotional loyalty isn't just romantic, it's existential. One misstep, one scandal, one shift in the Sultan's attention, and you're yesterday's news, shipped off to a convent or worse. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some harem women were trained to use musical instruments not for performance, but for seduction. The kora, a 21-stringed harp, wasn't just a song machine. Played in certain modes, at specific hours, it was said to make listeners emotionally pliable, open to suggestion, prone to nostalgia, susceptible to seduction. And if the music didn't work, well, that's when they broke out the charm water, sprinkled into wine, whispered over 3 times. By the time the target drank, he didn't stand a chance. You step away as night falls fully, casting the inner court in shades of blue and gold. Somewhere behind a thick curtain, a girl prepares for her first evening with a royal advisor. She's not nervous. She's rehearsed every move, every breath, every phrase. Her future, and maybe his, depends on how well she performs the illusion of spontaneous affection. In this palace, love is never just love. It's architecture. And someone always drew the blueprint. You wake up before dawn, disoriented, sticky with the residue of someone else's dreams. A rooster screams in the distance, not the cartoon kind, but the kind that sounds like it just lost a bet. You slip out from your reed mat, stretch your back, and follow the narrow path into the forest. You're looking for someone. You don't know her name, but everyone in the court called her the Bone Washer, which is not a title you win in a raffle. She lives on the edge of town, where the trees lean in like gossips and the ground gets soft under your feet. It smells of moss and old sweat. There's a gourd tied to a branch, her version of a doorbell. You knock, silence. Then a voice calls out, not from the hut, but from the trees. Take your shoes off. Of course, no one brings dust into her space. She deals in purity and corruption and everything in between. The hut is shaped like a beehive covered in soot. Inside, bundles of herbs hang from the ceiling, drying like old secrets. Bowls line the wall, each labeled with symbols you don't recognize. One smells like vinegar and regret, another like spoiled honey. She appears from the corner like she was always there, wearing 3 skirts and no shoes. Her eyes are yellow in a way that feels both medical and mythical. She doesn't ask why you've come. She already knows. People come to her for the same 3 reasons: to win someone, to bind someone, or to forget someone. All those require ingredients. And a little lying to yourself. She shows you her favorite tool, a pestle carved from femur, probably human. Some things only break if the past breaks first, she says, and starts grinding dried petals into powder. You ask what kind. From a flower that only blooms where lovers have fought, she replies. Like that explains anything. Here's your open scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether women like her were healers, witches, therapists, or early pharmacologists. Their records are oral, scattered, secondhand, always told from the perspective of those who feared them, loved them, or blamed them. Some say they preserved ancient knowledge about human chemistry. Others say they weaponized it. And still others whisper that they weren't entirely human to begin with. You wonder which theory feels safer to believe. The bone washer begins her demonstration. First, a love powder made from dried river mud, cinnamon bark, and beetle shells. It's meant to be stirred into porridge, fed to the beloved while making eye contact. Not prolonged eye contact, 3 seconds, no more. 4 seconds makes it grief instead of love, she says deadpan. Then comes a more dangerous blend. She burns resin over hot stones and adds shavings from a goat's horn, dried breast milk, and a piece of paper inscribed with the target's name and birth cry. Yes, birth cry. Not date, cry. Each baby has its own sound, she explains. It's the soul's first spell. That's the kind of thing she says casually, like you're supposed to nod and pretend your reality didn't just glitch a little. You watch as she stirs the smoke into a tight glass jar and seals it with beeswax. This one, she says, makes him forget every other name but yours. She doesn't smile. Neither do you. Because suddenly, this feels less like folklore and more like a gun disguised as perfume. What a sex story. Here's one for the fire. A wealthy trader once returned from Timbuktu with a second wife. Young and exquisite, but his first wife older, sharper, and entirely done with being overlooked, visited the bone washer 3 nights in a row. 4th night, she served him a charm-infused stew, thickened with yam and bitterness. By morning, the trader could no longer pronounce the second wife's name. He called her you, girl, thing. The woman cried, pleaded, begged him to remember. But every time she touched him, he recoiled like she'd shocked him. Within a week, she returned to her family in disgrace. The first wife? She kept the house, the staff, and the trade contracts. She also kept a jar of ash under her bed that buzzed when the moon was full. Make of that what you will. Here's your quirky detail. Some charm makers insisted on harvesting herbs while completely naked, believing cloth disrupted the plant's desire response. Others believed certain plants only released their full potency if touched by someone who had recently experienced heartbreak. That's right, emotional damage was a magical qualification. You couldn't fake it, either. The plants allegedly knew. One charm maker reportedly got rejected on purpose just to stay eligible. Now that's job dedication. You notice, in a far corner of the hut, a pile of bones soaking in clay water. Human? Animal? Both? She shrugs when you ask. You can't make new love, she says, without burying old bones. You want to ask if she means metaphorically, but you don't. You just nod like you understand. Because in her presence, metaphors tend to become physical objects, and physical objects tend to hum. As you leave the hut, the air feels heavier. Not oppressive, just aware of you. You wonder how many people in this village are in love because they wanted to be, and how many are in love because someone added the right whisper to the right spice at the right moment. And would they even know the difference? Would you? The bone washer watches you go, arms folded. Careful, she says. Love given freely is strong. But love taken, that one never forgets it was stolen. You walk under a blazing noon sky where the air ripples like it's trying to escape its own skin. The path ahead is a patchwork of red dust and jagged shadows cast by baobab trees that look like they've been yanked out of the ground and replanted upside down. In the distance, laughter drifts from the women's dying pits wide, sunken basins brimming with indigo, henna, and fermented bark juice. And surrounding them, like a living mosaic, are women kneeling in rows, beating cloth against stone with the precision of drummers. Their hands are stained deep blue, their clothes brighter still. Patterns of stars and rivers, and secret sigils that say more than a diary ever could. You're not here to shop. You're here to decode. Because in Mali, what someone wears isn't just aesthetic, it's language. Every line, every dot, every slash of color is a whisper. And if you know how to read it, you can tell who's fertile, who's grieving, who's seeking, and more dangerously, who's seducing. A young woman points to a square of cloth drying in the sun. It looks like random stripes and spirals until she leans in and says, "This one says, I am not married, but I sleep well." She laughs and goes back to folding. Across the courtyard, another woman lifts a piece of cloth with diagonal cuts and 3 circles. "This one's for lovers who travel," she says, "to remind them where they'll return. These aren't just pretty patterns. These are spells, disguised as fashion, flirtation wrapped in fabric. And the best part? Men rarely notice. That's half the charm. Here's your quirky tidbit. Women in certain towns developed entire romantic dialects using fabric. It was wearable code. One pattern tiny, squares inside larger ones, meant I see you, but I will not wait. Another spirals with no center meant I'm open, but dangerous. Imagine Tinder, but every swipe is dyed into your skirt, and only the clever get the message. It wasn't just what you wore, but how you wore it, how high the hem sat, how tight the wrap, whether the knot was left or right. Whole relationships bloomed and withered in the space of a glance and a hemline. You follow an older woman into a side hut, where rows of folded cloth are stacked like ancient tomes. She hands you a bundle wrapped in plain muslin. "Not all charms are powders," she murmurs. "Some are sewn." Inside is a simple strip of linen with a thin line of script inked down the middle. It's written in Ajami, a blend of Arabic, script, and local languages. "This one," she explains, "is for protection from betrayal. Worn under your waistband, touching the skin." She's not smiling. She's not joking. This is dead serious defense. Sex and status are braided tight. Here, a well-dyed cloth is more than just pretty, it's proof. Proof you're desired. Proof someone paid for your beauty. Proof you have value. The brighter the colors, the more public your affection. Faded cloth says neglect. Torn cloth? Scandal. There's even a saying, he who stops bringing indigo has stopped loving. Subtle, not remotely. Effective. Very. Want your sex story? You've earned it. Once, a high-ranking advisor fell for a weaver completely beneath his station. She wore nothing fancy, just clean cuts and perfect lines. He visited her secretly at first, buying gifts for his sister. But one day, she handed him a cloth. She'd woven with hidden script along the edge. "I will not be hidden." That night, he brought her to a royal gathering, draped in the very cloth she made. The whispers were immediate, the fallout volcanic. But he didn't care. She never made another charm after that. She didn't need to. Her whole life became one. Historians still argue whether this cloth coding system was a formal language or a loose set of evolving customs. Some believe it functioned like heraldry symbols everyone learned as children. Others think it was constantly shifting, a living language that only worked if you stayed immersed in the social soup. There's even speculation that some patterns were meant to deceive, to throw rivals off your scent while your real affections hid in plain sight. Love as espionage. Molly really knew how to keep things spicy. You leave the dye pits and wander into another courtyard where several women sit quietly, scarification tools beside them. Not everyone wears their messages on cloth. Some wear them in skin. Tiny dots, lines and swirls etched into shoulders, thighs, or collarbones. Some signal adulthood, others fertility. Some say, "I've been chosen." And sometimes, a particular pattern worn just under the breast or along the inner arm means, "I belong to someone powerful. Approach at your own risk." You spot a young woman getting a new mark inked just above her hip. She doesn't flinch. It's a charm, not to attract, but to warn. You start to understand. In Mali, love is never simple. It's layered like cloth, painful like scarification, coded like a spy's notebook. You don't say, "I like you." You wear it. You carve it, you dye it, you tattoo it into memory. No wonder love charms thrived here. They weren't just magical interventions. They were cultural extensions, continuations of an already coded world. As the sun dips low and the cloth on the lines turns golden in the fading light, you realize you've barely scratched the surface. You haven't even seen the fertility rituals yet, the rain dances, the masquerades, the masked gods that flirt with mortals. But you're close. The drumming has started again, slow and steady. The night is about to get louder. And love? Love is about to get weirder. The drums begin before you see them. A slow, deliberate thump that rolls through the ground like thunder with secrets. You're not sure if it's an invitation or a warning, but your feet move anyway, guided more by vibration than direction. You pass under woven arches into an open field ringed with figures, some dancing, some watching, some unmoving like trees. But the center is chaos. Masks leaping, skirts spinning, bare chests gleaming with oil and sweat under the rising moon. This is no tourist show. This is a fertility ritual. And it doesn't care if you understand it. It only cares that you feel it. The air pulses with incense and anticipation. Somewhere, a goat bleats once and is never heard again. The elders say the spirits like sacrifices that don't scream twice. You swallow and step forward. You're not just a guest here. You're being watched. A masked figure brushes past you, wearing a headdress made of feathers and bronze. The mask has no eye holes, but you feel it staring straight into the part of you that still hasn't made peace with your ex. That's the thing about these ceremonies, they bring everything up. Not just lust, regret, longing, jealousy, need. These rituals weren't invented for fun. They were for rain, for crops, for life. And in Mali, rain was always linked to sex. If the gods didn't feel loved, they didn't love back, so the people danced. They sang songs that made the wind blush. They painted their skin with ground she and ashes, decorated their ankles with shells that clicked like flirtation in motion. Nothing was subtle. Everything was sacred. You join the ring, feet stumbling through centuries of choreography. A woman, with bells on her knees, catches your wrist and spins you. Her eyes are lined with crushed charcoal, her hair threaded with string dyed in menstrual blood. She's not flirting, she's channeling. You realize the dancing isn't for each other, it's for the sky. They're trying to seduce the weather. And you're now complicit. Want your royal sex story? Here's one straight from the archives of whispered legend. A queen named Lost to Time, but remembered in gesture, once disguised herself as a dancer during a fertility festival to catch the eye of her rival's lover. She wore a mask carved from ivory, her body painted with river clay and secret charms, sewn into her belt. As she danced, she circled him 3 times, each pass slower than the last. The man never saw her face, but by the 3rd night, he was dreaming only of her. He left his lover, begged the queen for forgiveness he didn't know he owed. She took him, then sent him back with a warning stitched into his robe. Look twice before you follow a drumbeat. They say he never danced again. Historians still argue whether these rituals were religious devotion or erotic performance with agricultural benefits. Some call them orgiastic offerings to fertility deities. Others frame them as community theater with serious intent. The truth is probably both ceremony as spectacle, intimacy as weather insurance. It's hard to grow millet when the gods are in a dry mood. Here's your fringe fact of the night. Some masks used in these rituals were considered too powerful to touch directly. Dancers wore charms just to survive wearing them. One particular mask, shaped like a crescent moon with jagged teeth, was said to cause unexpected pregnancy if looked at too long. No joke, people would avert their eyes like it was a solar eclipse with boundary issues. That mask now sits in a museum somewhere, glassed in and harmless, or so they say. You move further into the ritual. Women carry gourds filled with water, not to drink, but to pour over the earth. Each splash is a message. We are ready, we are open, we are planting more than crops. One girl walks slowly, a clay pot balanced on her head, hips swaying like a lullaby. She's not even trying to seduce. She's proving she already knows how. That's the quiet power here. None of this is begging. It's a declaration. There's a moment in the ritual where everything slows. The drums hush. The crowd parts. A child is brought forward, maybe 5 years old, eyes wide and serious. A priestess dips her fingers into a bowl of oil and paints a spiral onto the child's chest. Then, lifting her face to the sky, she sings a single note that doesn't sound like anything a throat should make. The sky listens. You listen. Even the goats listen. The spell is sealed, not with blood or fire, but with a child's body marked for continuity. This is fertility beyond coupling. This is legacy, lineage, everything in between. You step back as the drums rise again. The crowd bursts into rhythm. Bodies crash, grind, roll. Someone is crying. Someone else is laughing. A man lifts a mask to his face and starts howling like a jackal. You have no idea what any of it means, and that's the point. It wasn't made for understanding. It was made for survival. You don't charm the gods with logic. You charm them with rhythm, oil, and a little shameless audacity. As the ritual winds down, sweat-soaked dancers collapse beside cooking fires and water jugs. You sit in the dirt, watching sparks float into the night sky like fleeing souls. You think of all the fertility spells hidden in smiles, the rain dances folded into flirtations, the invisible thread between desire and rainfall. Mali didn't. Separate love from life, or sex from survival. Everything touched everything, even the sky. You hear it before you see it, a steady trickle of water that sounds almost too delicate for this landscape. It draws you like a whisper, away from the fires and fading drums, down a winding path cut into the earth like a forgotten scar. Trees here are closer, tangled, conspiring. And then you see it, the sacred well. Not marked with gold or statues, but wrapped in silence, the kind that thickens your breath. The rim is worn smooth by centuries of fingers lovers, widows, rivals, and midwives all leaning in to speak a name into its depths. This isn't a wishing well, it's a listening one. They say if the spirit of the water knows your longing, it might echo your name back through someone else's lips. Or it might drag it under and keep it, forever. Either way, there's no guarantee. But that's never stopped anyone. You crouch beside the stone, the air suddenly colder. A woman is already there, kneeling, head bowed so low her forehead touches the stone. She whispers something too soft to hear, too sharp to ignore. When she finishes, she ties a small pouch to a nearby root. You see others, dozens of them, hanging like fruit from the branches above. Cloth bags, tiny bottles, teeth, folded notes sealed with hair. You realize you're standing in a forest of heartbreak. Every tree is blooming with confessions. She stands, meets your eye just once, and walks away without a word. You want to ask what she said, but it's too late. And honestly, it's not yours to know. This well is not for tourists. It's for the desperate, the devoted, and the dangerous. Here's your hook. Not all love charms are meant to attract. Some are made to erase. In Mali, not everyone wants to be wanted. Some want to be forgotten. Some want to forget. Others want revenge, but soft, slow dripping, emotionally elegant revenge. That's what this place is for. And if you listen closely, the well doesn't just echo names. Sometimes it laughs. There's a tale of a young bride named Benta, married off to a man 30 years her senior. The night before the wedding, she came to the well with a charm she'd sewn herself, just a single black bead wrapped in thread. And dipped in her tears, she dropped it into the water and whispered, "Let him be kind, or let him be gone." 3 months later, he died in his sleep. Some say it was malaria. Others say his spirit was pulled under by the name he never learned, she said out loud. She never remarried. But she smiled a lot after that. Historians still argue whether this particular well was seen as divine or simply dangerous. Was it sacred? Water or an emotional landfill? Some believe the well predated Islam, tied to older animist traditions. Others think it was repurposed during the empire's height, where official religion and unofficial practice braided together like hair. What no one doubts is its power. Too many people visited for it to be dismissed as mere superstition. Even the skeptics lowered their voices here. Here's your fringe detail. The water from this well was sometimes bottled and sold at night markets, but only if the moon was waxing. It couldn't be boiled, mixed, or shared. You drank it alone, in the dark, facing east, with your right hand on your heart. If you did it wrong, it was said your future children would forget your name before they were born. Harsh? Sure. But love's never been a gentle science. You move closer to the rim. Look down. The water is still black, but not empty. Shapes shift beneath the surface, maybe leaves, maybe not. You think of all the names floating down there, layered like sediment. Hopes, regrets, grudges too sharp to speak aloud. Someone once tried to drain this well, claiming it interfered with local morality. The next week, his livestock ran wild, and all his sons started stuttering. Coincidence, maybe. But no one's tried since. Want another royal sex story? You've earned a twisted one. A noblewoman, scorned by a prince after years of secret visits, came here with a charm made from a lock of his hair and the ash of his love letters. She dropped it in and asked the well to make him love only her or suffer. Within weeks, the prince began composing songs about a faceless woman who visited him in dreams. He stopped eating, stopped writing. He stared at walls and whispered poems to his reflection. When he died, they found the same phrase carved into the walls of his chamber. "You are already mine." The noblewoman never spoke of him again, but she built a shrine beside the well. You back away, suddenly aware of the weight in your chest. You haven't said a name, but the well feels heavier now, like it's holding a question you didn't mean to ask. The wind rises just a little, and the pouches in the trees sway like chimes. You wonder, how many people walk around thinking their choices are their own, when in reality, someone dropped a charm into the dark and whispered them into motion. You leave the clearing slowly, feet soft on the earth. Behind you, the well waits. It always waits, for more names, for more longing, for more unspoken deals made in moonlight. And somewhere deep beneath it all, the spirits keep score. You hear the laughter before you see the man soft lilting, too smooth to be honest. That's how you know it's him, the prince. Not the kind carved in gold or chanted in griot epics. This one's still young, still reckless, still dumb enough to think charm can outmatch charm. He leans against a tree, dressed and embroidered. Cotton, rings on every finger like he's auditioning to play himself in a story someone else wrote. His name is forgotten by history, or maybe deliberately erased, but everyone remembers his fall. And her, the girl with the charm sewn under her tongue. You sit down beside him, and he's already spinning the tale, half proud, half ruined. Was the third son, not the heir, not the spare, just the charming one. He knew how to dress, how to dance, how to make ministers feel seen and courtesans feel chosen. He collected hearts the way other men collected horses, until her. She was nothing, or so he thought. A servant's daughter. A little too quiet, a little too observant. She carried water in the mornings and firewood at dusk. She never spoke unless spoken to, and even then, barely. Until one day, she looked at him. Just once, and smiled. That was it. The prince laughs. Again, but it's thinner now. She had a silence like honey, he says. It stuck to everything. He started looking for her after that. Made excuses to pass her family's courtyard. Offered coins for errands that didn't need running. At first, he thought it was conquest. Then it became confusion, then obsession. Within weeks, he couldn't eat unless she looked at him. He started hearing her voice in his sleep. Though he swore, she never spoke a word. And then came the dream soft. Strange, heavy with symbols, snakes curling around his ankles, rivers running backward, his own face turning to stone. One night, he found her outside the compound walls. Just standing there, barefoot, as if waiting for the moon. She walked up to him, placed her fingers to her lips, then to his chest and walked away. He followed her home, not physically, emotionally, permanently, and every day after, he grew. Quieter, softer, less prince, more shadow. You ask what happened next. He shrugs. She told me the truth eventually. It was a charm, sewn under her tongue by her grandmother. Thin strip of leather, soaked in milk and ink, inscribed with a verse and tied with her own hair. She was told never to remove it. The charm made her silence seductive. Made every unspoken word feel like a promise. She never wanted to use it, she said, but I made her curious. He chuckles, bitter now. I'm everyone's cautionary tale. A prince who begged a servant for affection and got it. All of it. All at once. Historians still argue whether this story is real or dramatized, if it was a metaphor for political scandal, or an actual case of charm-induced mania. Some scholars claim the prince's decline was due to poisoning or inherited madness. But among charm workers, her tale is legend. The girl who spoke through silence. The boy who drowned in it. Here's your fringe detail. Tongue charms weren't always sewn in. Some were etched into the roof of the mouth using sharpened reeds dipped in charm ink. The ink was made from ash, honey, and crushed beetles, painful, permanent, and invisible unless you knew what to taste for. The result? Every word you spoke carried enchantment. And every silence was deafening. In love games, that's a nuclear option. The prince takes a small object from his pocket, a loop of thread knotted in the shape of a spiral. She left this when she vanished, he says. Told me if I ever untied it, she'd forget me completely. He turns it in his fingers, slow. I haven't touched it. Not once. I'd rather be remembered in her silence than erased from her noise. You realize this isn't a love story. It's a haunting. Not of ghosts, but of choices. Of what happens when magic works too well. Because the hardest part about charms, they don't come with off switches. You set the intention, you cast it, and it lives. Even after you don't want it anymore. Even after the feeling changes. Especially then. The prince stands and walks away, humming something tuneless. You watch him disappear down a path lined with marula trees. thinking about how easy it is to misread silence as mystery and mystery as love. Somewhere out there, she's probably just living, free, maybe with someone else, maybe alone. But you know one thing, she never had to speak. Not once. And she still rewrote a prince. You sit with the fading light and the weight of that charm, wondering how many other stories ended before they began, because someone misread a look, a pause, a smile. How many people have been bound not by rope or ring, but by something smaller, subtler, a thread, a glance, a whisper stitched beneath the tongue. The sky has shifted again, darker now, with clouds curling at the edges like gossip held in the mouth too long. You walk into the outskirts of a small village, guided by the faintest scent of burned kola nut and she smoke. The houses here are quieter, the courtyard swept clean, too clean, like someone's trying to erase stories before you can read them. You're here to meet an elder, one of the few left who still speaks openly about the charms. Not because she's nostalgic, because she's tired of everyone pretending magic wasn't real, just because it's no longer fashionable. She greets you on a low stool, dressed in a plain wrap, hair gray and wound into thick coils that look like rivers frozen mid-flow. Her voice is sandpaper over honey. You're not here for history, she says. You're here to ask if it still works. You open your mouth to deny it, but she waves a hand. Save it. Everyone's curious. Some want to know how to do it. Others want to know how to break it. She taps her cane against the dirt once. What they all want is control. She gestures for you to sit. So let's talk about what's really left of it. The charms, the magic, the morality. She pulls out an old calabash bowl filled with amulets, dusty, cracked, some wrapped in brittle thread. Others carved with symbols so faded you can't tell if they're letters or wounds. People still come, she says. Not openly, never openly. But they come. She fingers one charm shaped like a tiny ladder. This one makes someone climb back to you. Even if they swore they'd never return. Even if they've already married someone else. She holds it up to the light. You'd be shocked how many people want that, even now. Here's your hook. The love charms never left. They just changed form. Now they hide in perfumes, in playlists, in late-night texts that say, "Just thinking of you." In whispered affirmations chanted in bathrooms, in rings blessed under the table at engagement parties. The materials are different, the rituals subtler, but the hunger is the same. Humans haven't stopped charming each other. We've just outsourced the ingredients. Historians still argue whether modern uses of love charms are a continuation of tradition or a corruption of it. Some say today's charm makers are little more than entrepreneurs selling emotion to the highest bidder. Others argue that the line between healing and manipulation has always been blurry. Was it ever ethical to bind someone's heart, even if they said they loved you? Especially then. The elder nods at your silence. You think love should be clean, she says. That it should arrive like sunlight, unforced and glowing. She leans forward. But real love is messy, scared, it hides. It doubts. That's why charms exist. Not to cheat it, but to find it. To catch it before it slips away again. You watch her place another charm into your hand. It's warm somehow, though it's been sitting in the shade. This one, she says, makes someone dream of you every time they hear your name. Not see you, just feel you. Like smoke in their ribs, she shrugs. Most don't last, but the memory lingers. That's usually enough. Here's your fringe detail. Some modern charm workers use radio static and old voicemail recordings in place of traditional chants. Others code their spells into digital playlists, placing anchor songs at specific intervals to embed emotional responses. It's less roots and feathers, more algorithms and vibes. But again, different tools, same ache dot she tells you about. A boy who came last month, asking for a charm to erase his ex from his dreams. Said he was haunted, she recalls, couldn't sleep. kept hearing her laugh in his bones. She gave him a powder to burn under his bed. 3 nights later, the dreams stopped. But so did his appetite. That's the thing with forgetting, she says. You never get to choose which part gets erased. You ask if she still believes in the power. She looks you dead in the eye. Of course, but belief isn't the engine. Desire is. Belief just gives it permission. She leans back, eyes half closed. People want shortcuts. Want to skip the risk of being vulnerable. Charms offer the illusion of control. But the truth? She points to your chest. It's all still happening in there. The charm just sharpens the edge. The sun dips low, and she starts to pack the charms away, slow and deliberate. You realize she's not just preserving old magic. She's curating emotional inheritance. Generations of ache, woven into bone and thread, not for sale, just for remembrance. She stops suddenly, holds out one final object, a small bottle, corked and clouded. This one's not for love, she says. It's for letting go. You take it, feel the weight. It's heavier than it looks. Or maybe that's just the part of you that recognizes it too well as you rise to leave. She says one last thing, almost too soft to hear. Magic isn't about forcing others, she murmurs. It's about revealing what's already there. And sometimes, she adds, what's there isn't meant to stay. You arrive at the edge of the village just before sunrise, where the earth turns pale and cold like old parchment, and the wind carries no birdsong, only the dry rustle of leaves that sound suspiciously like whispers. There's a mound ahead, not tall enough to be called a hill, but shaped just unnaturally enough to make your spine alert. Beneath it lies the grave of a charm maker, no marker, no shrine. Just a few half-buried stones and the outline of a life reduced to silence. You've come to read what's left, because charm makers don't just vanish. They leave traces, etched into things, inked into ash, whispered into bones. You step into the burial hut nearby, crouching beneath low rafters blackened by time and smoke. A wooden box sits in the center. It doesn't look like much, just a carved cube stained with oil and locked with a frayed leather strap. But it hums. Not literally, emotionally. Like the air around it is remembering something it shouldn't. You untie the strap and lift the lid. Inside, strips of scorched cloth, tiny bone fragments, and long brittle scrolls rolled so tight they resemble veins. You take one out, gently, like it's still breathing. Unroll it. There, in a spidery scrawl, are the last recorded charms of someone whose name no one dared preserve. The first is a spell for longing, written in 3 languages. It reads, asterisk, if your hands remember the shape of someone's back, burn this leaf and touch no one until you've slept. You stare at it, half laughing, half stunned. Who writes that into history? Who preserves a feeling like that with more care than a king's decree? A charm maker, that's who. Someone who knew that real love doesn't need a statue. It needs a trigger, a scent, a sentence, a spell. Here's your hook. The grave holds no gold, no jewels, no royal endorsements. But it holds something far rarer. Instructions, confessions, a quiet archive of a life, spent shaping other people's stories. It's not the power that survives. It's the residue. You read another scroll. This one's more ambiguous. Asterisk, to end a spell without ending a person. Bury the object in running water with 3 apologies spoken over it. The 4th must remain silent. Chilling, isn't it? You wonder how many people followed it. You wonder how many DIDN single quotes to dot want one last royal sex story. It's less a story and more a legacy. A great Mansa once tried to outlaw charm making. Declared it a disruption of divine order. Within a year, 3 of his advisors married women with untraceable backgrounds, and all 3 changed policy overnight. One diverted funds from the military to river markets. Another passed land. Inheritance rights to daughters. The 3rd vanished into the desert with a caravan and was never seen again. The Mansa rescinded the ban, quietly, without explanation. But after that, charm makers began marking their tools with ink that faded in daylight. Just in case, historians still argue whether charm makers were victims of erasure or architects of it. Were they hidden because they were feared or because they preferred to operate in the shadows, slipping between cracks in history to avoid both praise and punishment? Some say they chose anonymity as a final spell to protect the power from being diluted by fame. Others believe they were silenced deliberately by kings and clerics afraid of magic they couldn't tax. Here's your fringe detail. A few charm makers reportedly etched messages onto the inside of turtle shells, then placed them under floorboards of sleeping chambers. The belief was that emotions released in dreams would sink downward, soak into the shell, and feed the charm. These were never meant to be found. They were not for the waking world. You step back, wondering what might be under your own feet, right? Now the air in the hut grows warmer as the sun breaks the horizon. Light pours across the objects in the box, and for the first time, the ink gleams red, then gold, then invisible. Like it never wanted to be seen in the first place. You close the lid slowly, rewrap the leather strap, and feel something settle. Not just the dust, something else. Like a lesson you're not sure you've learned yet. You leave the grave quietly. Not because it's sacred, because it's still listening. You've wandered through the entire empire now, through scent, silence, music, cloth, dance, pain, and memory. And if you felt anything along the way, anything sharp, strange, or too specific to explain, that wasn't an accident. Maybe it was a charm. Or maybe it was just history touching your shoulder on its way past. Now the wind is soft again. The sky is waking. The stories are quiet, but not gone. You close your eyes and let the final image fade, the grave, the scrolls. The silence between lines that meant everything. Now, close your eyes and let the noise of the day dissolve like ink in water. Imagine that quiet grave once more, tucked under the red earth, guarded by trees that remember more than they reveal. Breathe in slowly and picture the final scroll, still glowing with the last of the morning light. Whatever you carry tonight questions, echoes, maybe even someone else's name, let it rest. For now, you've walked far enough. You've traced the path of love not as romance, but as ritual, as survival, as a kind of quiet rebellion. Let that weight fall from your shoulders. Let your breath deepen. And when you drift off, imagine someone, centuries ago, whispering your name into a bowl of water, hoping you'd be found someday by story. Sweet dreams, wanderer. You've earned them. End of script. Sweet dreams.